Hi, Steve Good here with the Scroll Saw Workshop. I was checking my email tonight and I came across an email from one of my longtime readers, Lori Scott, and she sent along a link to a video that I found really interesting. As a matter of fact, the little jig that she pointed out here impressed me so much that I just went directly to the shop and made one for myself. Now, what this jig is let me show you a picture of it, and that'll probably make the whole thing easier. Here is the jig we're going to make. Now, if you followed my videos any at all, you know that a lot of times when I'm setting the right angle or any particular angle on my scroll saw, I will use a protractor behind the blade. And I've always just held the protractor back there while I reach down, and every once in a while you'll move it, you know, when you're trying to make the adjustment because you're holding on to it or it'll fall over. And Woodsmith magazine made one of these jigs to hold the protractor for a bandsaw project they were doing. And I thought this was such a great idea that I went out and made one for myself. And I just want to take you through a couple of the steps so you can, I mean, it's pretty obvious what it is, but I'll show you a couple little things that I had to play with a little bit. Okay, the first thing I did is I'm using 1/2 inch Baltic birch plywood. I laid the protractor on the wood and took a pencil and outlined it. Once I got that done, I took the wood over to the scroll saw, and I'm going to fairly carefully cut this out because you want it to look nice. So try to stay on the line or just outside the line, and then you can sand down to it when you get done if you need to. There's the piece I have cut out. Now I'm getting ready to drill my holes, the starter holes for these little brass screws that I'm going to use to hold it together. And the one thing that I ran into here is when you drill the hole through the plastic, make sure the hole in the plastic is larger than the diameter of the screw or it will crack. So if you need a smaller entry hole for the wood, use 2 drill bits. You know, use a larger one to get through the plastic and then draw a smaller one to get the screw in. If not, you'll have this situation like I did where it cracked on me a little bit. So I just went back on this one and drilled out the hole a little bigger and everything went fine. And you don't have to torque these down. You just want to, you know, get them in there tight enough to where it's going to hold it. Another issue that you can see right here is you see this little gap right here where the wood is. If I left this like this, I would be a 1/2 degree off, maybe even a full degree. It's hard to tell, but anyway, this little bit of wood standing out here was going to be a problem, and I recognized that right away. We have to be very careful because we don't want to change the bottom of this plastic. So what I did is I laid a piece of sandpaper down, a very high grit sandpaper, on my table saw so I knew I had a good flat surface. And I very, very carefully sanded this down until the wood and the bottom of the protractor were even. And again, do not sand into the plastic or you're going to change your angle permanently. So I worked on that a little bit. I got it very, very flat. Now I've got this other piece of plywood back here that I'm going to cut my back part out of, and just marked it to cut it to length. And it, you know, you probably need 2 inches behind it, maybe 2.5 inches. When I got ready to glue this together, I had to also make sure that when I glued this back on, that the bottom stayed flat to whatever surface it was on. So I used super glue and some activator to put it together, and I put it down on this MDF, which I knew was very flat, and put the super glue on the back of the wood for the gauge and the activator on this piece right here, and it dries very quick. So I pushed it together while holding both pieces down against this flat surface as hard as I could. I just wanted to make sure that the bottom of this protractor was on the bottom of this wood. So you do have to be, another step where you have to be pretty careful. Okay, there's the finished piece all glued together, and you can see that's what we got. So now we need to check it and make sure it's right. So I took it over to my scroll saw, and you can see here that I'm probably about a 1/2 degree off right now. So I went ahead and with this protractor, and this is a step you could do either direction. I happen to use the protractor first, and then I'll go to the next step here in a second, but you could do it backwards from what I'm going to do if you wanted to. Anyway, set this to exactly the 90-degree mark. Then once you get that done, move it out of the way and take another small block of wood, and it needs to be at least a 1/2 inch thick. 3/4 or an inch is even better. And you're going to cut a small kerf, just maybe 1/8 of an inch into the wood. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to pull that wood out, turn it 180 degrees, and bring the wood back in from the back of the blade. Now, if the back of the blade lines up exactly with this mark that the kerf that we cut in from the front, then you know the saw is at 90 degrees. Okay, some people use this method to set the angle of their scroll saw to 90 degrees. It works fine, and it's a good test, for me to test it, but I think the protractor is actually easier because you can move it and watch it at the same time, as opposed to cutting, moving it back. Okay, I'm still off a little bit, coming back and cut another curve. So it's a good technique, but I prefer to use it like this as a check. And then once you get that done, then at this point you can set this aside and use it whenever you need it. It's not some amazing jig that does something great, but it's just that one little extra piece of convenience that you have in your shop. Lori even recommended that she might put rare earth magnets on the bottom of her base to hold it in place. Kind of a neat idea. I don't think I'm going to do that. It seems to set pretty well. I think this back piece for me is about 3 inches, so I don't think it's ever going to have a problem with it moving or anything. But if it does, I might add the magnets later. So anyway, quick little video here. I thought it was a neat jig and worth sharing with everybody, and I want to thank Lori Scott for passing this along to me, and also thank Woodsmith Magazine for showing this technique. I'm Steve Good. Thanks for being here with me at the Scroll Saw Workshop.